My name is Cecilia Elizabeth White Dress Mercado Fraiser. And my Indian name is Wachiampis Desapila Miamakayam Shagyamani. Those were given to me by my grandparents, except the Mercado and Fraiser. I'm carrying both of my grandmother's names. My mother's name is Cecilia, and my father's mother's name is Elizabeth. Lizzie, 2 dogs. And they named me before I was born. My grandmother knew she was going to die, so she wanted to have a naming ceremony, and those are the names that they gave me. I'm from the Pine Ridge, Oglala. I'm an Oglala Sioux. I grew up in Denby, South Dakota. I grew up with around white ranchers and farmers, and I never knew the word prejudice because they all treated me real nice, and they never said anything to make me feel like Indian, you know. And then when I went to the boarding school in Pine Ridge is when I learned about the prejudice, that I was Lakota. And but when I went to school, I didn't speak English. I spoke Lakota. And when I was in school, they made us talk English, and it was really hard for me to learn English. They used to make us stand up against if we say Indian words in class, they make us stand up on the blackboard and write, "I will not speak Indian in class, Lakota in class," 500 times, and every word has to be perfect, you know, just like the beginning. And I went through all that. And finally I learned how to speak English, and now I didn't even talk English, Indian to my kids to where they don't know how to talk Indian. I spoke nothing but English. So they got mad at me, but for not talking to Indian to them. I did tell them things, but they always thought I was just making words up. But now they're living on the reservation, and they're learning to speak Lakota in school. My grandparents, I grew up in Denby, to where I had my grandfather, Martin Red Bear and Ben Red Bear, in Wolf Creek area. Martin Red Bear was a chief there, and once a month all the people gathered there at his place, and my father was teaching catechism. He was translating it to Indian, and they had gatherings, and they made us kids, when we they gather, they make us kids keep quiet and you know, listen. And if we get noisy, they send us, you know, somewhere to go play, and not to interfere when they're talking or things like that. We had to sit still and listen. That's I wanted to, you know, say about the way I grew up was that we used to ride horses all the time and traveled in wagons. My grandparents on my dad's side, every year in June, they travel up in the Black Hills in a wagon, and I used to go along with them, ride horses, and traveled all over the Black Hills. And then by September we get back to Oglala, and but that was for me, that was to this day it's an experience that I'll never forget, because our people are always talking about Black Hills, and I had to, you know, as a child I was in the Black Hills camping from place to place. And my grandmother and grandmother, they used to tell me about, you know, when I was when I reach when you ministrate, they didn't have these you know, these camp away from the house, because we grew up in log houses. But they always make us girls stay in the bedroom or stay out of the men's way. And we had to learn to cook, and not cook, but beat and sew and things like that. We weren't allowed to go into where all the people gathered. And it's so different these days, because young girls, they just don't care, or they don't know, or they didn't learn that. When there's a gathering, they're there when they have their administration. And they always tell us, or tell me, my grandmother, she always says, when in the future, you know, you're going to be among the Skawi Chasha, and don't forget that you're a Lakota first, and you're a girl, you're a woman. You know, they're going to be wearing pants and stuff, you know, be showing their shuita, their legs and all this. And she always says, don't do that. And it seems like today that's the truth now, that young, especially the young girls, we lost our femininity or something, you know, the way they dress and the way they sit and things like that, you know. That's what my grandparents used to tell me about the future, how it's going to be with, you know, a lot of things are going to change. My grandmother, Lizzie, 2 dogs, and her brother, they were in that Wounded Knee. My grandmother was about like 12 years old, she said, and her and her brothers were their parents were killed there, and my grandmother took care of my 2 little brothers. They ran into a ravine, and they just kept going till they were out of that place. And she tells us things like that, and when we were little, you know, it didn't I didn't really listen to it that much, but she used to, you know, tell us all these things, and tell us about the future of things that's going to happen, how our living and lifestyle is going to change, what we're going to eat. My grandparents, it seemed like they knew what was going to happen in the future. 'Cause even the food that we eat, they said that we were going to be sick in the future. And it seems like that's true nowadays, because nowadays there's diabetics and there's cancer and all these things. A lot of people are dying because of that. And alcoholism. They always tell us, it's going to be caused, by us changing like in the olden days, they were free to eat their food, but now we changed to this European way, and now we're all getting sick. My grandmother told me that in the future I was going to Sundance, and my one grandmother died, the one that lived, Lizzie, and she used to tell me that I was going to be carrying a pipe, and it scared me when I heard all that. And she said it will be the time when I won't be on the moon or anything when I carry a pipe, and that I would be involved in Hochoka, means a center of, like the Sundance or center of some. And I didn't think these things were going to happen, and it has been happening to me. They always tell us that not to pick up jealousy and all these things, because those are bad things to carry in life. So it's really hard, as you grow up, you listen to things, and sometimes I find myself kind of in those things, and then I remember what my grandparents tell me, and I get right back into what they tell me, that those are bad things, My grandfather one of my grandfathers on my mom's side, Martin Red Bear and Ben Red Bear, they were on that Wild Bill Hickok show. They traveled all over. They took them to England and back again. And they used to tell us all these things that they saw, up in England. They saw the royal people, the king and the queen, and that they came back through, they went in the ship, so they came back on the ship. And they tell us all kinds of different things that's happening, and things are going to change for us, that we were going to be losing a lot of our traditional ways. And it seems like that's the truth. We are losing a lot of our ways. Because these things were not written down. They were just told to us, word by mouth. And I guess each time we tell it, maybe we add a little more to it or something. And it seems like we need to get back to these things, but it's kind of hard to get back to some of these things because, like I said, it's not written in a book. Like talking Lakota, you know. When I was a little girl, we couldn't speak English, Indian in class, but when I get home, we speak Lakota. And then when I went out in life, I spoke nothing but English, and when I came back, everybody's talking English, and it's the elders or the older people or people that still hold the Lakota language. It's always good to see them when they know, they talk Lakota, and I can talk Lakota, freely. Through this Sundance, I've met a lot of people, and I went to, like I said, I met Martin here at this international Sundance. I heard of him before, and my Uncle Foolscrow, he named a lot of medicine men, and here, when I was dancing here at the International, I have rheumatoid arthritis, so excuse me. And here, Martin was there, and here it seems like he knew. He came over and we started talking, and he said, "Are you hurting?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm really hurting, but I don't want to, let nobody." I didn't want nobody to know, but here he asked me, and he brought me a jar of some kind of root, I don't know, and I drank that all through the 4 days, and I did pretty good. Afterwards, I wanted to see him again to see if I could get some for later on, but by then he left, so I didn't get to see him. But whatever it was, it really helped me in those days. And I've been dancing here for a long time. Uncle Foolscrow is my uncle, and he helped me along with a lot of things. He knew that I didn't have my period, so he asked me to help him with some medicines, and I know about it, but I don't dare to use it because it's not for me to use, it's his, so now they're all gone too. I don't know what else you want me to. My grandfather is Ben Red Bear. His brother's Martin Red Bear, and Martin is the one that was a chief in the Denby Wolf Creek area, and he had cattle that when they first start enrolling the Indian people, they were giving them allotments and cattle and things like that. And so he had cattle, and my other two grandpas Grandpa Dick and Grandpa Ben, they sold theirs because they didn't have any money. But Grandpa Martin, he, like I said, they gathered at his place maybe every 2 weeks or so, all the people. The Wolf Creek area, the Black Feathers, now they're Christian Science Church, but back in those days, it was a Catholic church, but everybody gathered, no matter what religion they joined, because when they first, after the Wounded Knee happening, the Christianity came in, the Catholic and the Episcopals were there, and so the Indian people either had to be a Catholic or Episcopal plus enroll and get their enrollment number and all that. So half of my family's Episcopal and the other half is Catholic, and then we have our Indian religion. So I grew up with knowing both of the Catholic, Episcopal, and then our Indian religion. I went to church in both. I went from Catholic church to Episcopal church, and then back in those days, they weren't allowed to practice their Indian religion. That was secret. So we had the secret religion. They tell each other and they gather and they have their Indian religion. So I went to all three of them as I was growing up. And so my grandfather, he helped everybody that came with food. He killed a cow and then he shared with everybody. And or if he had money, he'd help out with whatever he can. And then when they died, all my grandparents died, people were still gathering at that Wolf Creek church. And it just took one person to say, this religion is just for Catholic. So that's when everybody broke up, and the Black Feathers, they went into the Christian Science. They went against Indian religion. And it was at the Sundance in Pine Ridge. There was, our grandfather, I have another grandfather, Spotted Crow, and then they went to Washington to bring back the Sundance. And so when they had it in Pine Ridge, there was Sundance going on, and then all these Christian Science, all these other church religion came about, and then they had a rodeo because the government didn't want the Indians to practice that religion by itself. It had to be with all these during fair time, they said. So that's how the Pine Ridge, how it started in Pine Ridge till finally it just broke away, and now it runs by itself, the Sundance. They don't have it during fair time or like that. And so my grandparents, when they died, they had that split. And then our church, no one goes to it anymore. It's in Wolf Creek. And my grandma Lizzie, her people, they're 2 dogs. One of my relative is Rick 2 Dogs. He's a medicine man. It seemed like my relatives most of them are in Indian medicine man. Our grandmother was a medicine woman. She died. Then Uncle Foolscrow, we at home we considered him as a chief of the medicine men, because when he was young he was really good. He helped a lot of people, and then as he got after the 70s, 73, wounded knee occupation, they made him into chief, and they had the Sundance on Aunt Kate's land in Medicine Road at Kyle. My father, Jim Whitedress, he worked as an interpreter at the Pine Ridge office when he was growing up, and when my grandpa Martin had his gatherings, he used to do catechism, interpret in Indian. Then my dad, he worked on them for that 18 highway, they call it, in Pine Ridge. They dug that road, they shoveled that by hand all the way from Pine Ridge up towards Martin. They dug that, with teaming horses. He was on that, and he was a bus driver for quite a while in Pine Ridge, OCS. Let's see, what else was... As I was growing up, when we traveled through the Black Hills with my grandparents, Grandma Lizzie and Grandpa Paul, it was a lot of fun because we ride horses, and the only place I get scared is when we go through the buffalo pasture. I'd sit in the wagon underneath the seat, because I was scared of the buffaloes. But as soon as we passed that, we start riding horses again. And we traveled way back in those back trails, and rangers would come over and talk to my grandfather. They knew him for, every year that we go up, they go up there. They just tell him to watch the campfire, and they even bring like wild game over for us. And my grandmother, she picked up agates, those rocks. She knew where to get them, and then you hit them with she had a hatchet. You had to hit it a certain way, split it, and then there's those real beautiful pictures inside, like some look like trees or a scenery inside. And she used to take those to the rock shop and trade them with, we didn't have money because we had horses, and we didn't need gas or anything. So she used to trade for food and materials and stuff like that. And all winter long, my uncles and my grandmother, they tan hides and make buckskin. And my uncles weaved baskets out of willow trees, and So when we go up to the hills, that's what they use to trade for food and clothing and stuff like that. And there was, we end up over at Custer pageant. And then there, as that time I was young, small, so we used to go dance in front of the grandstand. We put on all our costumes and we'd go dance out there, and then people would throw money at us. And at that time I was a little girl, so I didn't know any difference. So we used to get that and then give it to Grandma, and she'd get whatever we need for, because money didn't, we didn't think that much about the money in those days too. And so it was fine till I was about like 13 years old when the last time we were up there, and my grandmother, we danced in front of the grandstand. And as I was going, by then I learned English real well. And then I started hearing these things being said about us Indian people, and I got mad and I didn't want to go out there anymore. I didn't like them anymore. I didn't like them for calling us, those Indians. Look how they dress, or stuff like that. I didn't like that. It made me feel bad, and I thought, why do I have to go dance in front of them when they talk bad about us like that? I told my grandmother, and she says, well, just don't pay attention to them as long as you're having fun, But I didn't like that, so I didn't go anymore. I didn't want to perform like that for what they were saying. So I learned about the prejudice that were in boarding school. There was a difference between us Lakotas and the half-breeds. They call them half-breeds and call us Lakota. And our moccasins, because up to 4th grade I wore moccasins and I wore hair ties and dresses that my mother made. And as I was going to school, then we talked Lakota, so that was, my relatives, was hard on us. And here the breed kids, half-breeds, they start saying things like, when they argue at us and they say, well, you dirty Indian, you gut-eater, all this stuff. And that's when I first learned about this prejudice thing too. And I grew up with these white ranchers as kids, and they never said that to me. I didn't know that till we got to boarding school, and then up at Custer, at fairgrounds, that's when I started hearing these things. I didn't know that we were poor. To me, I never felt poor. I always felt happy, and I didn't know anything about money and all that. And I didn't realize that we were so poor, that but then I always thought that's our traditional way, the way we eat papa, and we eat timsila and all these, we dry our cherries and plums. And I always thought it didn't matter I didn't know about this poor rich business back in those days. So I was happy just growing up. And as I start growing up, I see and hear these things, and I still feel like I didn't grow up poorly. I feel like I still, I know we didn't have the monies and all that, but I felt rich for the way they talk to us and tell us things, and help one another, and you know, just being there for each other. Like nowadays, it's so different. When our relatives dies, sometimes we don't even hear about it. We have telephone and cars, and still we don't hear about it. Back in those days, when someone dies, they come clear across from the other end of the reservation to attend a funeral and be with the family and help out. Nowadays, it's different. It's like a switch, you turn it on and then you turn it off, and that's it. My grandmother, she was the most wisest one, because she's always telling me about the future, about things that's going to happen and what we're going to eat. And I used to like to ride horses a lot. And when I reached a young lady when start period, then Grandma says, you stay away from the horses. You don't ride horses those, when you're like that. You go in that room and you stay there. And we were to stay away from things like that, we listened. We never argued. I never argued back at them. I listened and did as I was told, And so I asked my grandma, I said, why can't I ride I asked her, I said, why can't we ride horses? And she said, well, those are the sacred time, You stay away from animals, and you stay away from people. You don't step over a man's clothing or their feet, or if you see something on the floor, you pick it up and put it aside, and then you walk through. When you sit, you don't sit with your legs like this or like that. Just keep your legs together. You don't sit. Those go with this administration when you first become a lady. You don't act that way. You don't bend over in front of a man or people. If you have to bend down, you turn around and then but you don't bend over in front of them. So I tell my daughters that too. I always tell them, you don't do that. And they want to know why. I said, well, that's what Grandma and my mom told me all my life, and that's the way I grew up, and I want you to learn the same way. That's being respectful, and that's our Indian way. Well, they always say, well, how come when I go to school, this teacher is doing that? I said, well, that's because she's European, and we're Lakotas, Well, they don't do that anymore. I used to go through all that with my 8 daughters, and now they see the differences and know the difference, so they come back and they bring my grandchildren back over to me and want me to tell them about it. Like right now I have a grandson here with me. He talks back to his mother a lot and at home, so she sent him over here, and he's been a real good boy, he hasn't been acting that way. Hopefully when he goes home, he don't act that way. Has a little more respect for Mom. Because I keep telling him, she's the only mother you have. That's what my grandparents taught me when I was little. Don't answer back. Don't be arguing. Because you just have them for a little while, and then when they're gone, they're gone. They never come back. And so I tell my grandchildren that too. My daughters. I have 2 sons. One is adopted. My adopted son, he's one of these alcohol syndrome babies from the day he was born. But we love him, and we've been talking to him. This is why we started the YMCA too, is because we were concerned about other kids, why it's that way. I forgot what else was supposed to. I really liked it during the summer when I was growing up too. Is spring and summer is when our people gather at our place, and we used to go pick cherries and plums, and they all gathered. My aunties and their grandmas, they pound cherries, ground cherries, canned cherries, and the plums too, and then they make a whole lot, and then they divide it among each other for the winter. Nowadays, nobody does that anymore. Back in those days, we had to have respect for everyone, and everybody, when we call him uncle, and Lekshi and Tui and cousins, and we never we learned not to be disrespectful towards them. When they talk to us, we sit there and listen to them. We don't interfere or tell them, no, that's wrong or anything. We just have to sit there and listen. That's how I learned as I was growing up. I didn't argue back, like I said, with my parents or anyone. I just had to sit and listen. Did I go through everything?
I was going to ask you,
actually, she's a aunt, or my great-grandmother. She was a medicine woman. This was before I was born, this great-grandmother. They called her Wanahi Wapia, and her name, I just love her name, is Matot Chantaipia Nachlachpa, means a bear hanging on the side of the tree was her Indian name. And she believed in working with the spiritual Wanari. She has that medicine and she lived. My Aunt Kate is the one that told me a lot about her, Kate Fullsgrove. She lived away from the people. Instead of living in tents or teepees, they made log houses. So they built her one away from the family, and she lived by herself. And they take her, meat and stuff like that over to her. But she stays by herself, and then when people get sick or need help spiritually, they go to her and she helps them. Well, then again down the line, I have an aunt named Mary McShine in Wolf Creek. She is a medicine man and medicine woman, and at that time the government wouldn't let the Indians perform our religion. It was outlawed. If someone done it, they got arrested right away. So my aunt, it was a secret thing in Wolf Creek. She when I seen her work on my mother got sick, and I was a little girl. But my aunt told us all to sit still and pray. And then, I don't know, she brought some kind of root, and she used the ember of the fire and water, and she worked on my mother to where she was really sick, and she helped her till she got well. And people go to her and get doctored by her, and she's the only one that I know there in Wolf Creek that was a medicine woman besides my grandmother. My grandmother, I wasn't born at the time, but I heard so many things that my mom and Aunt Kate used to tell me about her. Like, I feel like I could feel her around me sometimes because I think a lot of her. But they helped, it's different from the medicine men's. I guess when they do their things, they're helping. They don't do like the medicine men's where they have you weepy, how they wrap up. They don't do that. Or they don't some of the things that the medicine men's do. My aunt didn't do that. It was a lot different with her. And my grandmother, great-grandma. Then my cousin coming down again, Rick Two Dogs, he's a medicine man in Pine Ridge. And then my Uncle Footscrow. I've seen my Uncle Footscrow. I used to live in Garden City, Kansas, and I'd come back for a visit. And here he came over, and they wanted us to be at this ceremony. So we went to the ceremony, and I seen him perform on this lady. She was sick, and it was during, she was already too far gone. He couldn't cure her anymore because it was too late. So he told her, he didn't tell her, he told the rest of us that her spirit already left to Tunkashila. It's what we're seeing is just the body of that woman, and she's going to give all of us water and we're to drink it because it's a blessing, because it's just her body. Her spirit is already with Tunkashila, he said. And here, sure enough, after that, she died. He couldn't cure her because it was already too far. He said she waited too long to go to him, so he couldn't do much for her. And then I've seen him do other things that he did cure some people, and like this one man where he was in a dancing contest, and there's another a girl that was competing against him from another place in Canada or somewhere, and the grandmother wanted her daughter to win, and this guy he's from Kyle to it, or Wambly somewhere, and so they had the dancing contest, and the grandmother she used a newspaper, alligator picture in the paper, and against this man. So this man was dancing, and all of a sudden he fell down, and he couldn't dance anymore. And so the girl won, and the man got sicker and sicker, and they took him to Pine Ridge Hospital. From there, they took him to Chicago, and sent him to Denver, all over the place, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with him. He was paralyzed. He couldn't even talk, So they brought him to Uncle Fuzcrow, and Uncle Fuzcrow, he prayed for him, and it was all dark, and he prayed for him, and then he goes, oh, and here he went over and grabbed something on that man's leg, held it like that. They turned the light on, and here was that picture of that alligator. It was wrapped on around his leg. Nobody seen it. It was invisible, So he took that, and he said, oh, whoever sent this is going to go back into them, and they'll be sick, but she's not going to die from it or anything, but she's going to feel that she did wrong. So he held it up and blew it like that, and it disappeared. And so I really have a lot of respect for Uncle Foscrow in that way. And a lot of times, after the Wounded Knee occupation, and later on, he asked us to help him. He asked my husband Curtis to be a driver for him. I helped him. People talked to him, and some of them didn't understand Indian, and I'd interpret for him. And it hurts whenever he tells them, certain things not to do or to do, and they don't do it, Of course, they're hurting themselves too, but to me, it always feel like it took a lot out of him, when they don't go through what they were told. And then when some people do it, you could just see, that the differences, that I learned that when I was watching Uncle Footscrow do a lot of things like that. Talk to him, talk for him in English and in Indian. He puts his whole, belief and everything into it. And this What else?
Maybe you could share some of the guidance he used, because he helped a lot of people with his words, giving them guidance so they could come back to their own Indian ways. Maybe those would be valuable words if you could share some of those.
When Uncle Footscrow was helping people, he tells them, because a lot of them that I've witnessed says that they didn't know their some of the things, traditional ways, but they want to know, and they ask him things, and he tells them, certain things not to do, or to do the, like, it's, but they don't listen. They just, it seems like they believe, and again they don't believe. And he, like, even to clean their pipes, he tells them what to do, but some of them don't do it, and some do. But there's something here that I'm really confused about too. About when we first got our pipe, this lady bringing the pipe over, a good man and a bad man, and the bad man was put away, and then it came down the line like this, and now we're at this stage where, I don't know, it's really hard, well, our sacred thing has become something different. I know they say it's bad luck to talk about it. It's not nice to talk about it, all this stuff. But the thing is that, and I love these people that's taking care of the pipe, I have a lot of respect for them. But the young man that's taking care of it, like when I was growing up, they didn't want me to marry, and of course this is our way, grandparents want us to marry into our own relatives. We can't marry your cousin because he's related to grandpa or grandma in this way. We're still a family. If you want to get married, marry someone away from the family, So as I was growing up, that's what I learned, and I felt like everybody on the reservation is my relative, because my grandparents and mom and dad, they'd say, this is how you related to this one, and this, they tell me all the whole thing.